Welcome to Himalayan Echoes. This is Himalayan Echoes Calm as the theme this year for creativity, arts, literature, and music. And we must add sport to it as well, now that Arjun is here. I am Jahnavi Prasad. I am the festival director. And I will be in conversation with Arjun Vajpayee. He's a mountaineer of great eminence since the age of 16 when he climbed the Mount Everest as the youngest mountaineer in 2010. It's a great feat, really. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I must say, Arjun hasn't stopped there since 16. He's been at it and he's climbed a number of peaks since then. And the last one being in 2018, which was Kanchenjunga. He gave it 2 tries, and the second one he got it right. So Arjun, coming straight at you, really. Clearly, you are a man of your own mind, a strong mind, and you knew that at an early age to convince your family that you want to climb a mountain called Mount Everest at the age of 13. How did you battle that with them, really? What was it like? What did 13-year-old, what did a mountain mean, climbing a mountain at the age of 13? What did you think of it?
Back in the day, it was not so technical. It was mostly about seeing the view from the highest point on this planet. I still very distinctly remember my trip down a memory lane where I was in the Sahyadri Hills. There are foothills in Maharashtra, and I was on top of a small hill with my grandfather, and I asked my grandfather that I want to see how beautiful will it be from the highest point on this planet when I was standing on top of a small hill. And little did I know that in the next less than 5 or 6 years, I was 10 that time, I was in my 6th grade. Little did I know that I would end up climbing the world's highest mountain in less than 6 years. So it was very difficult to convince your parents also. Somewhere in my heart, I never doubted myself, but there's a lot of no, which I heard from all around me. The idea of climbing the world's highest mountain when you're 16 is obviously was not heard of. So it was definitely very difficult to convince them, especially when you're not a very academically bright child in India. Your parents are more focused on at least get through your next grade, like don't get any compartment papers or something this time. So that's a very everyday challenge, which I think most of us can relate to. They were like, "Where are you dreaming about climbing all of these mountains? क्या कुछ पैसे मिलेंगे चढ़ के?" I'm like, "नहीं, पैसे देने पड़ेंगे चढ़ के." So they never really got the concept of it.
Your perspective as a 16-year-old about a mountain to now you're 28, has it changed the meaning of the mountain for you?
Definitely, yes. But not so much, like because I still stay very true to my heart in the sense of my love for the mountain. I love being out there, regardless of whether we reach the summit or not. I love the camping life. I love the cold wind. I love that thinness in the air. I love the vastness of the valleys and the never-ending glaciers. It's beautiful. So I love being up there, and my love for them has not changed a bit. Definitely, let's say experience sometimes is a good thing and sometimes a bad thing. When I was 16, when I didn't know how bad would it hurt when I fell into a crevasse, or how bad would it hurt when I came into an avalanche. I never knew that, so I never thought about it, and I gave my best foot forward. Now, with all that experience, sometimes definitely you have a double thought which crosses your mind, and you say that probably I should be more careful, because you know what can go wrong now. So, and sometimes the experience helps you to make a safer decision. Probably that's what they call slowly getting seasoned by the mountains, or becoming a more mature climber, where you're not like going all out and ballistic, but you're like trying to get back from the mountain with as many people as you can.
Yes, because before coming in front of you, I had to sort of brush up on my mountaineering knowledge. So I've just been reading up, reading up a little bit about various mountaineers and their experiences, and most of them have really lost their loved ones, and it's a very risky sport. Has your attitude towards towards risk sort of changed in a certain way
Definitely, and I
in
come
your
from
in
a
your
school of
not
thought
not
that
only not
I
only
come
while
from a
you're
school of thought.
risk attitude towards risk in your daily life, now that you're in Noida and you're dealing with XYZ for your work. So does that come in somewhere, this risky
See,
attitude?
on a lighter note, like I always joke around and fool around with people, and they call me an adventurer, and I tell them, bro, like you're driving around in Delhi and Noida, like those roads are much more dangerous than climbing Mount Everest. So, in a lighter way, yeah, we all are taking risk in our own lives, in every way possible. Mountains have only taught me that the day it's your day, nobody can stop you, and the day it's not your day, even if you literally try to jump into a crevasse, you're not going to die. So it works like that. Coming from a sport like mountaineering, where margin of error is almost next to nil, we move around in extremely limited resources, in extremely intense situations, in very situations where pushing yourself and going beyond your limits, you don't understand. There's a very fine line, and you often cross over it. So, in the pursuit to explore, in the pursuit to keep knowing how far can we endure within our minds and outside on the mountains, we keep pushing ourselves. And sometimes the mountain does give us learnings and lessons in terms of sometimes failure of expedition, sometimes loss of life. I personally have, out of my 13 expeditions which I have conducted over 8,000 meters, most of them we've actually ended up losing a team member. So, or two or three of them have actually gone by where we've come back with the same amount of people who we left with. So, it is a sport with high risk and high amounts of repercussions with every action which you take. Sometimes your actions can determine somebody else's fate on the mountain. Hence, one has to be very certain, and the learnings are basic and clear that the mountain does not know the difference between a young boy and a grown-up person. The mountain does not know the difference between a man and a girl, or anybody, a wealthy man or a poor person. It treats everybody with absolute equality. Does not know the difference between a small mistake and a big mistake. So there are several lessons to be learned in the pursuit to explore things, and that's the cost of exploration. Risk is involved in all our lives. One must take calculative risk and move forward. Always plan and keep reserves for a rainy day to come back, because there are going to be rainy days. There are going to be bad days with heavy storms, and you've got to prepare for them so that you can endure through them for the sunny days up ahead. No storm always lasts forever. So these are various learnings which we get to know from our pursuit to explore, and it's a beautiful symphony of mountaineers and nature, Mother Nature coming together.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when you do climb a mountain, obviously these multiple thoughts are going through your mind. One is you need to figure out that you're stepping on the right path or on the right crevice. You're pulling the right sort of rope. You got to also monitor the weather conditions which are coming in. You have to have a pulse for that. So many things that you need to sort of watch out for, and it's always, I think, a sixth sense really plays a major role in that, apart from, of course, being an experienced climber. Is there anything else that your mind is calibrating while you're climbing the mountain? Is it like you've sort of figured out a new technique to climb, or are you clocking the presence of some dimension of, say, climate impact on topography? Are you, like, apart from just wanting to be there and reaching that summit and that experience and that thrill and that rush, is there any other aspects of climbing which have contributed to your character, and which you have been able to share with your students and counterparts?
So there is no way to the top of a mountain without having to climb the mountain within. We try to climb the mountain outside to be able to climb that mountain within. To say that we reach the top of mountains without having left behind all that baggage which we've been carrying, or to leave behind all the boundaries which we've set for ourselves, or to break down those walls which we've created just around ourselves because we are so scared to look beyond those walls, right? So without overcoming all of this, there is no way to the top of a mountain. A mountain is much more than what you perceive physically in front of you in an altitude. Like, it will come in ways, it will throw challenges in ways in front of you which are so personalized for each one of you, which will hit you at your lowest points and which will force you to overcome your fears. So it is definitely a very spiritual journey which every person, regardless of the social structure which they come from, regardless of what country did they come from, regardless of what god or faith or religion do they follow, they all put down their heads in front of one thing, and they put one step in front of the other, and they all go through this one journey of overcoming that mountains within themselves, right? And that's how you reach to the top. So definitely, when you're talking about perspectives, you're not only, as you keep going up, when you gain altitude, right? The beautiful thing about it is that it lets you see things which we should have seen probably until now, but we haven't been able to see just yet, right? Because of our own fears. And it gives you that first-hand information. When you see it, you not only get a perspective to the world, which physical world which we are living in, right? What we see and imagine as Earth, what we imagine as, boundaries and the end of a horizon, or how the sun comes up and how the moon goes down and the Earth is really round from up there. You not only just see this, but you also get a perspective in life about what are the things which really matter, right? How much can you actually go beyond your own body? How important is this physical self to experience this life, right? And how grateful are we to actually see the sunrise every day? Because what are the odds of surviving every day out there, right? And if you're doing it, it's so amazing. So that you gain a perspective at both ends, seeing things physically actually in front of you, a world which you live in but you've never been able to see until now, but also a world inside your head, right? Versions of your own self, which you never really knew that existed within you. But now that you overcome all of that, you know that this is a newer version of my own self, and this is also me. So that is a wonderful feeling. I think, as we said in mountain, there's no way to the top without actually going through this journey. Everybody goes through this. And I don't know if I was able to answer your question, but I hope this does it.
No, but I'm just wondering, you've committed about 7 times mountain tops. What is it once you reach the top? What is How much time do you get to spend there? That's one. I mean, one of the things that I is that you really have to cultivate a habit of reaching there and turning around.
Right.
I mean, that's very important because it has that pull. All your energy, all your rush, everything was geared towards this point of the summit. And now you've reached there, and now you want to stay there for longer, as long as you can extend it. But the mountain says, okay, now turn around. So number one was, what are the revelations that you sort of have experienced up there? Have you been alone by yourself, or have you been followed by a trail of people? What has it been
So,
there?
as the Sherpas always say, the summit is only halfway in your expedition. It's not a successful expedition till the time you've come back down all the way up to base camp. A mountain does not only impose challenges on its way up, also on your way down. So we have to come back down also quickly. We have very limited resources which are being pushed to its limits to reach the top, and then having just the right amount of resources when you're really tired and disorientated and managing your way down. Maximum accidents happen on our way back down. So that's the first question answered. We had barely spent about 15 to 20 minutes on the top. Second was that, are we alone? Yes. A lot of times you get, the mountain is, when we're talking about these 8,000-meter mountains, one must realize your definition and your wording and your terminology just changes, because what you consider massive, like, just imagine, like, probably people look at Burj Khalifa and they think that this is massive, and that's just 1/8 of what Mount Everest is. Like, that's probably the biggest man-made or natural feature which you will ever see rise above the Earth's crust. And these 8,000 meter mountains are these massive pyramids which are rising from the Earth's crust. And these are the biggest things which you ever see. And when you see the sheer magnitude, and you like your numbers change, your perception of big, your perception of length, your perception of depth, everything changes because you've never seen something so big yet, right? So even if we are like 1,000 people on the mountain, which never is like that, 1,000 people are probably put together with the base camp staff and everybody in a particular climbing season on the most commercial mountain like Everest. There'll be like 200 climbers probably max climbing at once on a certain patch, and we're like ants on a mountain. It's like literally, even if like a small inch of a small ridge just breaks and it comes on to all of us, we won't be seen. So it's if you're talking about crowding on a mountain, that just doesn't happen. Obviously, there are certain areas, bottlenecks where climbers are doing up and down, and because of certain dates being clashing, now on mountains like Everest, we are seeing little bit of traffic jams and stuff happening. That's the commercialization of all the mountains. On other mountains, still, there's nothing. You are probably just 8 or 9 climbers with another 10 or 15 Sherpas and another 10 people as a base camp staff, and that's it. On the mountain, you're going to be just 8 climbers with probably 8 or 10 Sherpas, and that's it. Like, so in that entire vastness and kilometers of endless snow and ice, you're alone. So you're literally nothing. You're like an ant on a big tree or an elephant.
With every person who has climbed summited peaks and gained recognition, there is always a Sherpa behind them, and that was with Everest as well in 1953. Tell me something about the Sherpa community. Give me some insights about them. What are they like? What is their life?
Sherpas always are referred as the unsung heroes of the mountains. They are very humble, wonderful, beautiful people, very extremely strong, extremely kind, very generous and loving people. Sherpa, basically the word Sherpa basically means a tribe of people who live higher up in the mountains in Nepal. They did extremely because they spent generations and generations in extreme high altitude. They were able to acclimatize better genetically. Their oxygen saturation levels did not drop as drastically as probably a person living at sea level would as they went into altitude. And generally, if somebody's lived in the mountains, they will know that mountain life is a hard life. It's not an easy life. Living in those extremely cold temperature conditions, up with very limited resources, with very little minimal medical conditions to survive in. Over generations, they became very hard people, very extremely strong people. And because they are so familiar with the terrain, over the years as explorers, modern mountaineers started exploring the Himalayas. They took shelter and they took help of the Sherpa community to help them climb these mountains, not only through the valleys, but also as very crucial aid on the mountain in terms of opening route. Over the years now, Sherpas have become technically also far more superior climbers than some of the best mountaineers and alpinists in the world. With the right amount of gear and knowledge and exposure which they're getting, they are leaving their mark and climbing some of the world's highest mountains in record times and doing it amazingly. They're doing really well for themselves.
Their genetic sort of built cuts them to go through the physical rigmarole of training for climbing a peak. So if you have to spend years and years and months training, climbing walls and pumping yourself up and making your core stronger, they don't need to do that regimen. It's just there in their daily lives, is it?
Absolutely. That's what I meant by harder lives. We try to simulate the same kind of hardships which we would go through on a high mountain in our daily lives. And by just being over there, by being prevalent in waking up and sleeping in sub-0 degree temperature conditions, your physiology literally goes through a change, which even I have seen. For example, just my exposure to 8,000 meter mountains year on year. Now I probably take altitude as fish to water because I went through 8,000-meter mountains from the age of 16 to 28. So most of my developing ages, where my physiology was taking shape, I was in the higher altitudes, and now it's much more easier for me to adapt to higher altitude or to adapt to cold than my parents would. As last year, my parents joined me all the way up to the Everest base camp. I was trying to climb Everest without oxygen, and it was a beautiful attempt for them as well, all the way up to base camp. But I was roaming around my shorts and sandals at base camp on the glacier, and my parents were like hustled up inside a complete big down jacket. So that's the kind of basic changes which you go through. The more exposure you get to a certain kind of activity, the more better you get at it.
So my next question really is, I'm jumping now, is, from what I hear is Everest Base Camp, everybody wants to go to the Everest Base Camp in the last decade or whatever. It's become a dumping ground for plastic. We are now in the throes of, climate change. We used to hear about it, it's coming, but now we are a part of it. Do you think it's going to affect the mountaineering sport for some time to come? The climate change happening?
To be very frank, as much as the mountaineering community is in regards with, all of our climbers and trekkers take in very due precautions on every expedition. Most of my expeditions, for example, have been eco expeditions where not only are we bringing down human waste as well and all the plastics which we're creating from base camp, but on the mountain and further up at 8,000-meter plus altitudes as well. We have equipment like a rest stop bag, which has a certain amount of bioorganic powder inside. It turns your excreta into gels, and it's a silver bag. You can pop it into your bag. It does not stink. So we take extreme care even on the mountains. As far as a change and impact of global warming, which has directly affected the Himalayas is concerned, there has been a drastic impact, and keeping in mind that most of our drinking water, even till date, with the best of the best technology which we have in place, most of our drinking water is still coming from our glaciers, still coming from our mountains. The feeding point of these glaciers are these mountains. There are billions of life which are dependent on the entire Himalayan range, starting all the way up from Karakoram down towards Tibet, coming down towards Nepal, India, going all the way towards Bhutan, Sikkim. This belt has billions of people survival on it, and I have personally seen a very big impact of global warming, the rising temperatures, the drastic weather changes, weather pattern changes, which are happening in our everyday lives, which we just let them go, are impacting the Himalayas very, very, very badly. Glaciers which used to span have not, like, it's like reading from the topography, you can very easily understand where there was a glacier 10 or 15 years ago. The rocks are designed in a certain way. You can see the moraine in a certain way, and you get to know where there was a glacier. And there are kilometers and kilometers which have receded. It's not even a joke. Regardless of where I have traveled, may it be the Kumaon Himalayas in India, may it be the Greater Himalayas in Nepal towards Mount Everest, towards other Makalu region, towards Kanchenjunga side, more towards our Sikkim side Himalayas, or may it be the Karakoram Himalayas. They've been drastically impacted. Glaciers are receding. We have no idea of what we are trying to do. Mountaineering having a direct impact is like saying, like wood, burning of wood, which was taking place by like 100 people, are impacting like an entire globe. It's such a small community. Till date, only 8,000 people have climbed Mount Everest. There are more people who are graduating out of Harvard every year now. So you have to really understand the proportions that you are talking. Obviously, now that the world is looking at mountaineering in center light, it has become a popular sport. Such crazy images, such dramatic images coming out from places which have not yet been seen by most people or media platforms does become very clickbaity, trend catchy, and they do spread news. And it is very important that we bring the certain amount of attention towards the Himalayas, but we must understand and address the real reasons behind global warming and not just try and pinpoint smaller stuff.
We're running out of time. Quickly tell me what is the future of Arjun Vajpayee now? Your last climb was 2017. What's the plan next?
I still dream like a 16-year-old does. I want to climb all the 14 highest mountains in this planet. Some of them are towards Pakistan. Some of them are towards Nepal. There is no Indian who's yet been able to climb all the 48,000-meter mountains. I want to put India in that elite list of less than 35 climbers in the world who've done it. So I want to put India in that list and become the first Indian to climb all of that.
Excellent. Thank you, Arjun, for this lovely, exhilarating session. All the best for your upcoming expeditions. I know you'd rather be on a peak talking to me rather than this Zoom room boxed in. I'd rather do the same in the outdoors. So all the best for the future. Lovely talking.
Thank you so much, Janvi. Thanks you. I had a wonderful time talking to you guys. It was wonderful. I hope to meet you soon again in the mountains.
Thank you.
Saga